As Philip mentioned, the Londonderry papers comprise the family, estate and political papers of the Stewart family, Marquesses of Londonderry. The Stewarts were an important landowning family with estates in Donegal, Antrim and Down, and they also owned property in England, most importantly the huge income-generating coal mines in Durham, from which they drew so much of their wealth. In the 1970s, Lady Mary, the daughter of the 7th Marquess, deposited her family papers with PRONI on an indefinite loan basis. So when we speak of the Londonderry papers, it's shorthand for a number of separate collections. So D654, and on most of you, and I apologise if not everyone has a handout, but on one side of your handout there's a breakdown of the Londonderry papers. So D654 relates to the records of the Londonderry Estate Office. D2846 relates to the papers of Lady Teresa, who was the wife of the 6th Marquess. D30030 are the papers of Lord Castlereagh, and D3099 are the papers of the 7th Marquess of Londonderry and his wife, Lady Edith. When the family decided to sell the Londonderry papers, they fully appreciated the importance of keeping the collection in Northern Ireland. And PRONI was offered the opportunity to purchase the collection, which thankfully we were able to do, and the purchase was completed in April of 2013. Shortly after that date, we were contacted by Lady Rose, the daughter of Lady Mary, who had deposited the papers with us in the 1970s. And Lady Rose kindly offered to deposit with us on an indefinite loan basis a wonderful photographic collection, largely relating to the 7th Marquess and his wife. And we are very, very fortunate to have that photographic collection in PRONI, in that it is a really rich collection and a wonderful visual complement to the papers that we hold. And I'm just going to give you a flavour, an outline of it today. So on the other side of your handout you have a breakdown of D4567, which is the catalogue reference number for what I've been calling the photographic collection, but it's really so much more than that. It's broken down, as you can see, into a number of different categories. So we have D4567 bar 1, which are diaries, and which include a really fascinating 5-year diary compiled by Lady Mary as a teenager. And it's just an incredible mix of normal teenage preoccupations, boys and dancing and parties and high political life. So it really is a fascinating volume. The photograph albums, there are 64 of them, and they're at the core of the collection. We also have a number of photographic folders with loose photographs within them. Scrapbooks, mainly relating to the travels of the 7th Marquess and Lady Edith, and they're a mixture of postcards and travel ephemera, and they're fascinating volumes as well. D4567 bar 6 then are loose photographs, and there are literally hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of these loose photographs that we've divided down into various categories. For example, Mount Stewart, and broken it down then again, Mount Stewart exterior and interior photographs relating to Lord Londonderry, etc, etc, etc. And anyone who's coming to the collection, I would say, yes, there's a certain amount of overlap between the material within the photographic albums and within the loose photographs, but there's much of interest within the loose photographs that doesn't appear in the albums. So really, anyone with an interest in the collection, don't just stop at the photograph albums, take a look at the loose photographs as well. There are also several volumes of newspaper cuttings, mainly relating to the life of political career of Lord Londonderry and also his wife, Lady Edith. And then no matter how hard we archivists try, there is always something that doesn't fit in easily to any category. So we have maybe 4 volumes, not too bad, that come under the miscellaneous category, and they include quite random things. For example, there's a volume of a treasure hunt in Mount Stewart in 1940 with clues to the treasure hunt. So, you know, a mixture of different things there. If we look at the photograph albums themselves, and as I say, I have a sample of them here at the front of the room, and I can see some people nodding, I can see some people are already very familiar with them. Thankfully, many of the albums have inscriptions on the cover. As you can see, there's some even with dates, which is very, very helpful. Within the photograph albums, there are also annotations, some dates, key people identified, which, as you can appreciate, made the job of cataloguing the collection so much easier. And I understand it was the family nanny we have to thank for this, so she deserves a great bit of thanks for making our job so much easier. And the photographs themselves within the albums and within the loose photographs, they're a lovely mix of formal studio portraits and then beautiful, intimate, relaxed photographs of the family, particularly featuring the family in Mount Stewart. So it's a wonderful mix, really lovely insight into the family. Now, I have said a number of times that the collection mainly relates to the 7th Marquess and his wife, Lady Edith, their family and their close friends and associates. But within the collection, which I should say dates from 1856 until the 1980s, so it covers a broad spread, within the collection, some of the earlier generation are featured there. So here we have Lady Edith's father, Henry Chaplin. Henry Chaplin was a Conservative Party MP, one-time Minister for Agriculture, but his first love was horses, as you can see there in his photograph. Sadly, his wife, Lady Florence, died when Edith was just 4 years old, so she and her brother and sister were raised by her uncle and aunt, the Duke and Duchess of Sutherland in Dunrobin Castle. Here we have on the left the 6th Marquess of Londonderry, who was Viceroy for Ireland in 1886 to 1889, the first Irishman to hold that title. He was also a Conservative MP for County Down. On the right, his wife, Lady Teresa, who was a very intelligent, formidable woman, a very strong individual, very strong-minded, very much at the heart of things. She was a leading political hostess. Her parties in Londonderry House in Park Lane in London were the stuff of legend. As I mentioned at the beginning, her papers are catalogued under D4846, and they are just fascinating. She corresponded with leading figures in politics, in the arts, in the church, in the army and the navy, so a very significant figure. The family was extremely well connected and moved in the highest social circles. Here we have King Edward VIII and Queen Alexandra on a visit to Mount Stewart in 1903. And I should say, because I know many people in the audience are particularly interested in built heritage, and yes, Mount Stewart and Londonderry House, Wynyard to a certain extent, they do feature within the photographic collection, but very much as a backdrop. Family and people are very much at the core of the collection. That isn't to say, you know, there is still much that can be gleaned from the collection in terms of architecture and furnishings that I think students with an interest in that area would find very interesting. Here is Charles, the 6th Marquess and Lady Teresa's oldest son. This is a very, in the photograph collection, this is one of the few photographs where Charles is sporting a moustache. A moustache was obligatory for officers. Here he is in his uniform of the Royal Horse Guards, the Blues, but people that are familiar with him and maybe have seen other photographs of him, he looks completely different with his moustache. And within the collection there's some other photographs of him in civilian gear with the moustache, which are a bit confusing when you're trying to fit it in time-wise, but most of them he's without moustache. So he attended Eton and the Royal Military College in Sandhurst. He was commissioned into the Royal Horse Guards, the Blues, in 1897. And here we have a photograph of him at his coming-of-age party when he is now styled as Lord Castlereagh. And this party was attended by Henry Chaplin and his daughter Edith, and it was at this party Charles, who had been quietly courting Edith for some time, proposed and was accepted. Okay, so an important party then. Here we have a lovely photograph of of Miss Chaplin, I suppose, as she was then, around the time of her engagement, looking so young. Beautiful photograph there. The couple's engagement, the couple's wedding, Edith's trousseau, featured very, very heavily in the press at the time. They married on the 28th of November 1899, and there's one of the press cutting volumes that I mentioned before is largely devoted to the wedding and the engagement and all the press coverage at the time. And an article from Country Life records that Miss Chaplin's dress was excellent, most excellent, perhaps for chic and style the best of the season. Another magazine, Madame magazine, noted that one of the presents Miss Chaplin had received was a cheque for £2,000 for her trousseau from her uncle, the Duke of Sutherland. But there was a condition attached. She was not allowed to purchase any of her trousseau in Paris or use any French dressmakers in England. This practical retaliation for the abuse which has lately heaped on England by our neighbours will doubtless go home to them as it touches their most sensitive point, their pockets. So there we go. So it's lovely to look back at the press cuttings. They're very lovely. The couple's first child, Lady Maureen, was born in 1901. Lord Castlereagh's parents persuaded him to leave the army to pursue a political career like his father before him. In 1906 he was successful in winning a seat for the Conservatives in Maidstone, but he was not an enthusiastic MP. His heart wasn't in it. When war was announced, Charles, Lord Castlereagh, as he was then, first served as aide-de-camp for Lieutenant General Sir William Putney, who commanded the 3rd Army Corps. In 1915, he wasn't happy with the role. It was what would have been regarded as a safe role, a staff officer role, but he felt removed from things and wanted to see active service. So in 1915, he managed to rejoin his old regiment as second in command of the Reserve Regiment of the Blues and was eventually promoted to major. And as Philip said at the beginning of the talk, really the photographs and the papers within the Londonderry collection always sort of spark off each other. So looking at this photograph, I'm always reminded of the beautiful letters, the very, very open, very frank letters that Charles wrote back to Edith while he was away on service. Many of his letters bypassed the military censor, so he was open, revealing about campaigns, and very honest in his feelings. When he rejoined his regiment, he knew that Edith would be very worried for him. It was actually she that had secured the position with General Pulteney on his behalf. So he writes to her and he says, "I am no tiger for battle, but I would rather you be anxious for me than ashamed of me," which I think is, just very, very honest. Through his letters, we see that he was pessimistic about his military prospects. He felt that his short sojourn in politics had maybe hindered his prospects somewhat, and he realised the limitations, and writes very candidly about it, he realised the limitations of cavalry in modern warfare. He saw active service and lost many friends, including the best man from his wedding, Harold Brassey. So I think at the end of the war, he was very disillusioned with modern warfare, and it is no exaggeration to say that this feeling stayed with him and influenced his later political career. Edith, meanwhile, was very busy. She channeled her very considerable enthusiasm and organisational drive and flair into the founding of the Women's Legion. Here she is in her Women's Legion uniform. Now, it's hard to underestimate the importance of this organisation. It was a hugely important organisation that contributed to the gradual change in the perception of women, of their role in society, of their capabilities and their rights. Thousands of women joined the Women's Legion to undertake work previously underdone by men in an effort to free up men to join the war effort. No less than General Sir John Cowans, Quartermaster General, advised Edith on the Legion's organisation and helped her with travel arrangements to France. And again, there's a wonderful series of letters between Edith and General Cowans, which again are bypassing the military censor. Edith is aware of manoeuvres and tactics before many other people are. Her travel documents are also preserved within the collection too. In August 1917, Lady Edith became the first recipient of the award of DBE in recognition of her work for the war effort. So, a great, great tribute to her. And here, leading a detachment of 120 drivers from the Women's Legion is Lady Edith on the Victory Parade in July 1919, in what must have been a very, very proud moment for her. On a lighter side, at this time, Lady Edith also set up a social club called the Ark, which was originally regarded as a place of refuge for those involved in the war effort, but the membership broadened out and it was very, very coveted. It was very coveted to be a member of the Ark. Members were usually given a nickname, often with some sort of alliterative play on their own name. So Edith's husband Charles became Charlie the Cheetah, and Winston became Winston the Warlock. And here we have Diana Duff Cooper as Diana the Huntress. And I would like to welcome a former colleague from PRONI, Neil Watt, here today. Neil catalogued the Ark papers within the Londonderry collection, and Neil is now, as many of you know, house and collection managers at Mount Stewart. And it was lovely to see him back again, springing into action, bringing chairs down to the back. So it was good to have him back. I should say on the 8th of February 1915, the 6th Marquess died, and Charles then inherited the title and became the 7th Marquess of Londonderry. He was released from his military duties in 1917 to assist with the political situation in Ireland at the time, where the Home Rule crisis continued to rumble on with no sign of any resolution in sight. Here we have Lord Londonderry in the second row, third from the left there, attending the Irish Convention in his capacity as Secretary of the Ulster Unionist delegation and Lord Lieutenant for County Down. As we know, the Irish Convention failed to reach an agreement. Lord Londonderry understandably became disillusioned with Irish politics and turned to the British political scene. He held a number of posts there, most notably the position of Under-Secretary of State for Air in 1920. He resigned from the Air Ministry to return again to Northern Ireland and take up a role in Irish politics, and became leader of the Senate and Minister for Education in Northern Ireland between 1921 and 26. So, as you would imagine, Lord and Lady Londonderry found themselves spending an increasing amount of time in Mount Stewart. We have a lovely aerial shot of Mount Stewart there. And Lady Edith in particular formed a huge attachment to the site and set about with great enthusiasm refurbishing the house and working on the gardens there. And here we have a number of slides. I have the photograph album that they're taken from on the desk here in front of me. They all date, according to the cover, from 1931 to 1933. And here we have Lord Londonderry's study and Lady Londonderry's study. And here we have a beautiful one of the drawing room, and just look at those floral arrangements, and when you're reading about Mount Stewart, so many commentators talk about the smell, the fresh flowers and the foliage and the potpourri. So just look at that, how wonderful. And here we have the drawing room again, and in the bottom right-hand corner we see the Congress of Vienna chairs, which are now in the dining room in Mount Stewart. And again, going back to the papers, there's papers about Lady Edith's work refurbishing the house, bills for various works that went on, the embroidery of the Congress of Vienna chairs. So again, we see the two elements of the collection complementing each other. The photographic collection, and here we have the staircase, and on the top of the staircase there's that beautiful portrait of Lady Londonderry as Circe, which is now in the billiard room in Mount Stewart. And if I'm managing to sound more knowledgeable than I would claim to be, I also would like to thank Anne, who works with me here in PRONI and who is a volunteer in Mount Stewart now and has worked on cataloguing some of the papers as well. Anne actually worked on a nice collection of papers relating to Lady Edith and her potpourri, which she had her own special recipe for. And then the next day when she was volunteering in Mount Stewart, she was in the potpourri room and she was there, There's the glass jars that I read about and saw the bills for Lady Edith ordering, so again, just lovely connections there. And here we have, I love this photograph. I love this photograph of this garden party in the early 1930s in Mount Stewart. And here we have Lady Margaret and Lady Helen, two other daughters of Lord and Lady Londonderry, looking very elegant at a garden fete in Mount Stewart. And the photographic collection, I think, shows us what is lovely about it. It shows us Mount Stewart as a house that was lived in and much loved. The focus for family life, as well as lavish receptions and a magnet for illustrious guests. And the wonderful restoration work undertaken at Mount Stewart by the National Trust and the new interpretation within the house, I think, manages to express some of the vibrancy of the house at this time, as it was at this time, and to capture something of the spirit of Lady Edith. Here we have some, of course, one of Lady Edith's lasting legacies was the wonderful, wonderful gardens she created at Mount Stewart. So here we have some beautiful tinted photographs by Clarence Little, and a couple of shots of the Dodo Terrace there at Mount Stewart, which again references Lady Londonderry's club, the Ark. Lady Londonderry's planting diaries remain in Mount Stewart, which is right and proper, as they inform the annual cycle of planting there. But there is much within the collection for anyone with an interest in the gardens at Mount Stewart. There's much within the collection about the gardens, about Lady Edith's work. It was interesting for me to see that she also generated quite a bit of an income from the gardens. She supplied cut flowers to many local businesses and cafes. She sold her potpourri, but I think if you were to look at the balance sheets, a lot more money was spent acquiring bulbs and specimens, not just from Europe, but from further afield. But very, very interesting looking into that minutiae of the detail. Among those horticulturalists that she corresponded with was Sir Herbert Maxwell. There's a beautiful, beautiful set of letters exchanged between Lady Edith and Sir Herbert Maxwell, who's corresponding with her well into his 80s. And she's instrumental in him getting the honour of the Order of the Thistle. So he always signs off, "Your noble knight." So it's beautiful, beautiful letters between the two of them. But family is very much at the core of the photographic collection. Here we have the beautiful Lady Maureen, the first daughter of Lord and Lady Londonderry's, born in 1901. In 1920, Lady Maureen married Oliver Stanley, a stockbroker, an MP, and second son of Lord Derby. Here we have, there's a number of beautiful photographs of Lord Londonderry's daughter from a relationship before his marriage to Lady Edith, Dorothy, who Lady Londonderry was very close to. She was a great support to her. And I just love this photograph. Here we have Lady Edith with Lady Mary as a baby, and in the background we have Lady Helen and Lady Margaret and Robin. So Lady Mary features prominently in the collection. She was born in 1921, and there's numerous photographs of her, the cutest baby photographs probably you've ever seen. There's entire albums devoted to her, so I think it's fair to say there's maybe a slight bit of favoritism going on. But and we also, of course, have the lovely letters that Lady Mary wrote to her parents, and it's very close. The three of them shared a strong and close bond. And here we have her here with her father and with her mother. I'm just trying to find. There's a lovely quote. There's a lovely quote from Lady Mary. Yes, here we go. She's writing to her mother, and she says, "There are really 3 goals to aim for. 1, Mount Stewart. 2, paradise. 3, heaven. But I'm sure you will agree, and you meant the first one," which is lovely. And as you would expect, horses feature prominently in the collection as well. There we have Lady Helen and Lady Margaret on a very big horse in the background there, and Lady Mary. And this beautiful photograph, there is Lady Mary with her elder daughter Elizabeth, and there on the right in that very nifty little basket seat is Lady Rose, who deposited the photograph collection with us in PRONI. I mentioned at the beginning that we have several really lovely, they're lovely to look through, several volumes of Christmas cards that were given to Lord and Lady Londonderry, and this is one of Lord Londonderry's photographs with Hamiltonian on it. And here is his famous pole march, which won the St. Leger Stakes in Doncaster in 1932. In 1931 then, Lord Londonderry was appointed Secretary of State for Air in the national government led by Ramsay MacDonald. Here's Ramsay MacDonald there, seated on the Lilo, third from left. There was much gossip and talk at the time that Lord Londonderry's appointment was prompted by Lady Londonderry's friendship with Ramsay MacDonald. And we have the correspondence from Ramsay MacDonald to Lady Edith here within the Londonderry papers as well. Ramsay MacDonald had a tendency for a very overblown, inflated writing style, but through the letters you can see that his affection for Lady Edith and the value he placed on their friendship was genuine. And again, he's very, very open and frank in his letters to her. I was looking at one letter earlier today again, and he's writing, it's around the time of the Geneva Convention, he's quite frustrated, things aren't working out, and he writes to her, "I am just tired in mind and body and feeling the strain. For years I have had nothing but trouble after trouble and anxiety after anxiety." So, you know, again, very revealing series of letters there. Here's a beautiful photograph of Lady Edith. And in the post-war years, Lady Edith had already established herself as a leading society hostess. She had a magnetic personality, and, you know, looking at the letters and the papers within the collection, it's clear everyone was just a little bit in love with her. She had friends in leading lights in the artistic and literary world, in the world of high society, and in the political world. But it was Lord Londonderry's appointment as Air Minister that set the couple at the heart of the political world in London. And Londonderry House, their magnificent residence in Park Lane, became the scene for numerous lavish receptions. Now I have the photograph album from which the next series of photographs of Londonderry House came from on the table here. As many of you probably know, Londonderry House was demolished in 1962, so the photographic record that we have is very, very important. In 1822, Londonderry House was purchased by Charles, the third Marquis of Londonderry, and his second wife, Frances Anne. The building was remodelled and enlarged by the Wyatt brothers between 1825 and 1828. And Benjamin Disraeli described the Londonderry banquet to celebrate Queen Victoria's coronation as the finest thing of the season. Nothing could be more recherché. We'll just go through some of the slides here. And so, yes, in a different home at the time, it's lovely looking between the photographs and going, oh, where is that now? Yes. And here we have the magnificent drawing room. I mean, isn't that just beautiful? And in the background there you can just make out the portrait of Lord Castlereagh on the left and his half-brother, the third Marquis, Charles, on the right. And here we have this magnificent staircase where, you know, when Disraeli is writing about that function, it would have been at the landing in that staircase that a bejewelled and magnificent Frances Anne welcomed guests. And I'd just like to read you a little quote. It dates to 1908, just a quote about the interior of Londonderry House. "All these rooms communicate, and thus on occasions of great balls and receptions, the guests can pass from one to another without having to meet in those eddying throngs which make such functions in less ample houses a thing of terror for the gowns of fashion and pitfalls for swords and spurs. Of these great rooms, the state drawing room leading from one another are the chief. Here Elaborately painted and decorated ceilings look down on a collection of beautiful furniture and priceless china, where the east and the west seem to have been ransacked to add splendour to the whole, and where great mirrors reflect over and over again the riches assembled in endless profusion. Which, yes indeed. And, yes, so plus change, there we have the same staircase featuring again, and here we have Lady Edith at the eve of opening of Parliament Party, looking magnificent as well. Directly behind Lady Edith is Ramsay MacDonald, the Prime Minister at the time. Behind Ramsay MacDonald is Stanley Baldwin, his successor, and with his back to the camera is Lord Londonderry. And here we have, this dates to 1937, here we have the table set for dinner at Londonderry House. And some time ago I was cataloguing letters of condolence to Lady Londonderry on the death of her husband in 1949, and there's a real sense in those letters of a sense of the passing of time and the end of an era. And two individuals actually, Lady Desborough, who was a lifelong friend of Lord Londonderry, and his son Robin, both write to Lady Londonderry, and they both remember Lord Londonderry after a dinner party in Londonderry House, just pausing and going, "We do these things better than other people." And you know, looking at those photographs there, I think we have to agree. These photographs were taken in the summer of 1939, the year before Lady Mary's wedding. So some beautiful photographs of Lady Mary and Lady Edith and the 7th Marquis just having tea in the library in Londonderry House. And it's particularly beautiful, isn't it, that one there? Whatever about the gossip about his appointment as Air Minister, Lord Londonderry immersed himself into the role. An enthusiastic aviator, he took flying lessons and obtained his pilot's licence in 1933. And from his own landing strip in Mount Stewart, he regularly flew himself to England for appointments. Not to be outdone, Lady Londonderry and her daughters also took flying lessons. Lady Mary became a very accomplished pilot. She was an accomplished pilot by the time she was 13 by all accounts, but had to wait until she was 17, which was the legal age for obtaining a pilot's licence. Lord Londonderry was a very popular minister among his staff and the Air Minister, and going back to those letters of condolences, that comes out very clearly as well. And he had many successes in his role. One highlight, I think, of his time was this quite amazing air tour he took part in. It was a tour of RAF bases, billed as a sort of morale-boosting tour. So he covered over 16,000 miles in 1933 to 1934, journeying to Egypt, Palestine, Iran, Iraq and India. And that tour is detailed in a number of the photograph albums. I have one of them here on the table. So a magnificent achievement for the time. But by 1935, the national government was coming under increasing pressure from its critics. Individuals were calling for a more rapid expansion of the RAF than Lord Londonderry was comfortable with, or that he considered practical or necessary. There was mounting criticism that Lord Londonderry and his staff had underestimated German air strength, and Lord Londonderry's position became increasingly untenable. In a speech in 1935, he defended his role as Air Minister, and he also defended the use of aerial bombing as a tool in modern warfare. There was a huge political backlash against him, against what was perceived as the defence of the undefensible, which I suppose when you think about it is quite ironic given the role that aerial bombardment came to have in the Second World War. So in June 1935, Stanley Baldwin, who had succeeded Ramsay MacDonald, dismissed Lord Londonderry from his role as Air Minister. He appointed him leader of the House of Lords, but after the November election he dismissed him from that post as well. And Lord Londonderry never recovered from that. He, on one level, could accept being dismissed as Air Minister, but no one had been removed from the position as leader of the House of Lords before. So he felt it a great insult. So he was quite demoralised at this time. And he threw himself into an effort to foster more positive relations between Britain and Germany. And between 1936 and 1938, he visited Germany 4 times, sometimes in the company of his wife and his youngest daughter, Lady Mary. Again, this is all detailed in the papers and correspondence within the Londonderry papers. He met with leading officials in the Third Reich, which is also detailed in Lady Mary's diary that I mentioned earlier. And as this image of all the flags flying under the Nazi flag at the Winter Olympics of 1936 illustrates, Lord Londonderry was not alone in his efforts at this time, and there was quite an international dimension to appeasement at this time. In the House of Commons, Winston Churchill, Lord Londonderry's cousin, was one of the few vocal and persistent critics of the Nazi administration, and the correspondence between the two cousins on this matter is absolutely fascinating and one of the highlights of the political elements within the Londonderry papers. And this is a letter from Winston Churchill to his cousin dated May 1936, where he writes, "I hope that you will not become too prominently identified with the pro-German view. If I read the future aright, Hitler's government will confront Europe with a series of outrageous events and ever-growing military might. It is events which will show our dangers, though for some the lesson may come too late." And unfortunately for Lord Londonderry, the lesson did come too late. When war broke out, he found himself ostracised from former friends and political colleagues, and it was quite a difficult time for him. Here we have a photograph, one of the last photographs of Lady Edith at Londonderry House, dressed for the opening of Parliament and dated 1948, with the portrait of Castlereagh in the background. Lord Londonderry was to die the following year. He died in February 1949, and we can see from the photograph album and from the papers that family was a comfort, and Mount Stewart was a comfort to Lady Londonderry at this time, although tragically her daughter Lady Maureen and her son Robin predeceased her. Here we have a lovely photograph of the wedding of Catherine Stanley, who was the daughter of Maureen, with quite an important guest there in the front row. And of course, Lady Mary features strongly in the photograph collection after this date. Actually, some of the the more recent photographs rather in the collection were actually taken by Lady Mary, who developed an interest in photography. And there's just one lovely letter that I just want to note. Going back to those letters of condolence that I talked about previously, Lady Londonderry's sister-in-law, the Countess of Ilchester, writes to Lady Londonderry on Lord Londonderry's death and says, "I often think how lucky you and I are in our afterthought daughters, for Mary and Mab are indeed blessings in our old age," which was certainly true. And just before finishing, I just want to give thanks to Rebecca Mason, who was a placement student from Queen's University, Belfast. The private records team in PRONI is very small, and for many projects, we wouldn't be able to complete them without assistance from our placement students. And I thought it was interesting with Rebecca, when she started the task, she had never been to Mount Stewart. She hadn't heard about the Stewart family. She didn't know anything about it. But after several weeks, she could recognise the family members, even if they were half hidden at really awkward angles. She became very, very familiar with them and was captivated by the photograph collection and visited Mount Stewart many times. And similarly, I know of those who have visited and long loved Mount Stewart, and who have found resonance and new insight in the papers and photographs at PRONI, which I think is as it should be. For all three, the photographic collections, the papers and the site are so closely intertwined, and each, I think, complements and enriches the other. And just before finishing, again, for those that aren't maybe familiar with PRONI or with searching our online catalogue, I just want to give a very, very quick introduction to it. So PRONI, we no longer have a standalone website. The PRONI site is found on the NI Direct website. You can search our e-catalogue, our online catalogue on site, so you can do a huge amount of work before you even come to PRONI and narrow down what sources you want to look at, okay? So you first go to search the catalogue, scroll down again and search the catalogue again, and then you have an option of searching or browsing, but I would recommend browsing because then you can work down through the different categories in any collection. So go to browse and enter in whatever you're looking for. As you can see, it'll bring up a list of reference numbers. So you've typed in D4567, which is the catalogue reference number for the photographic collection. So click on that. Click on that at the left. You'll see it says view over there on the right, but don't go to view till you get down to exactly what you want to see. So click on D4567 and that'll show you the breakdown. Do you see? Bar 1 is diaries down to bar 8 miscellaneous. So say if you want to focus in on the photograph albums, you go to bar 2, click on that again, and then that'll give you the list. You see it says 1 to 15 of 64, so there's several pages. So you just go down them. And then you say, oh, I want to look at this one here, photograph album dated to 1901, and only then do you hit view, and that will give you the catalogue description, and most importantly it'll tell you whether it's open or closed. A small amount of material within the collection, within the whole collection, would be closed on preservation grounds. So before you come in to do your research, just do a little bit of advanced work to see what's open or closed. And if there is closed material that you'd want to look at, please just email us. There's our generic email address there at communities-ni.gov.uk, and there is the website address, www.nidirect.gov.uk/PRONI. And our opening times, apart from Thursday, we're open from 9 until 4:45. Lots of people, our busiest day would probably be Thursday when we open a bit later in the morning. We open at 10 in the morning, but we stay open until 8:45. So I hope very much that I'll see some of you again. If anyone has time, you can even register as a PRONI reader before you go. But please, before you leave today, if you have time, come and have a look at some of the photograph collection, some of the photograph albums from the collection. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.